If the Osmo Action 6 cannot clearly beat GoPro and even DJI's own Action 5 Pro, why should you spend your money on it? Imagine you set both cameras to auto, walk outside, hit record, and later, scrubbing through the footage, you genuinely struggle to tell which clip came from which body. That was my first reaction when I put the new Osmo Action 6 next to the Action 5 Pro. Both looked sharp and clean. No dramatic leap, no instant "this destroys the old one" moment. Just two very competent action cameras fighting for attention on the same timeline. So in this review, we are going to strip away the launch hype and marketing slides. We will talk about the new sensor, the variable aperture, the low light performance, the stabilization, the audio ecosystem, the heat management, and how all of that feels in real use. By the end, you will know whether the Action 6 actually earns a place in your bag, or whether your current action camera is already more than enough. Let us start with the headline spec change, because that is what DJI wants you to notice first. The Action 6 steps up to a 1/1.1-inch type sensor, which is noticeably larger than the 1/1.3-inch chip inside the Action 5 Pro. On paper, that means better light gathering, smoother gradients, and more flexibility when you start cutting for different platforms. The real magic is that this sensor is square, and that changes how you shoot. In the new free crop mode, you shoot in a 1x1 square frame at high resolution. Later in the edit, you can carve that single recording into a horizontal 16:9 video for YouTube, a vertical 9:16 for Reels or TikTok, or more classic 4:3 and 3:4 looks. The important point is that you are not throwing away quality to do it. You frame safely, hit record, and worry about which platform it is for when you get back to the timeline, not in the middle of the moment. The bigger sensor also changes how this camera behaves when the light drops. Tiny sensors with fixed bright apertures have always struggled at night. They either smear everything with heavy noise reduction or turn the scene into a muddy mess. DJI is attacking that problem with a variable aperture system that can move between about f2 and f4, and also offers fixed steps like f2.8 and a starburst-style f4 setting for point lights. In super night mode, the camera can float between wide open and stop down, balancing motion blur, brightness, and shadow detail automatically. When you compare the Action 6 with the Action 5 Pro at Blue Hour, both at the same frame rate and resolution, they look similar at a quick glance. But zoom in, and you see that the newer camera holds more texture in the shadows and rolls off bright signs and street lamps with more grace. Those are the details you only notice when you pause a frame, but once you see them, it is hard to unsee. Things get even more interesting when you bring in the GoPro rival. At a standard 4K action frame rate, the Hero tends to lean toward a flatter, slightly gray overall look, while the Action 6 prefers a more natural, slightly richer rendering. DJI claims around 13.5 stops of usable dynamic range versus roughly 10 on its competitor. When you point both cameras at a bright sky and dark foreground, you can see where that extra room is being used. Clouds hold shape longer before clipping, and the deep areas do not collapse into a single block of black. There is also something new here that you do not usually see in this category: dedicated macro shooting with real control over focusing distance. DJI offers a close-up adapter ring with simple icons printed around the outside. Turn it to the flower icon and the camera locks in at around 11 centimeters, which lets you fill the frame with petals, fabric texture, watch dials, or any tiny detail. Rotate it to the portrait icon and the focus point jumps out to a comfortable arm's length, ideal for daily vlogging. Switch to the mountain icon and it prioritizes distant scenes, so you can leave the adapter on while capturing landscapes. For real-world use, that control matters. Most action cameras either refuse to focus close at all or go weirdly soft when you move them near your face. Here, you can deliberately choose how close you want to work and keep that distance consistent across a whole sequence. It turns the Action 6 from a pure helmet camera into something you can use for product B-roll, travel details, food shots, and anytime you want tight framing with some depth separation without dragging a giant rig around. None of that matters if the footage looks like jelly the second you start moving, and stabilization is still one of DJI's strongest cards. The in-body system smooths out handheld clips so well that most people will never need a separate gimbal. You can switch stabilization off if you absolutely want the pure, uncropped sensor readout, but for walking, running, biking, or handheld vlogging, the standard rock-steady style modes are where the real magic lives. The baseline mode trims the edges just enough to give the algorithm room to breathe. You end up with a field of view roughly similar to an 11mm lens, which is great for most action shots. There is a stronger option that also locks the horizon more aggressively, cropping in further toward a 17mm equivalent. This is where you can tilt and roll the camera dramatically while the horizon stays level. There is also a middle ground that corrects moderate tilts while preserving more width, useful when you are filming someone else rather than wearing the camera. Of course, every jump in stabilization strength means more cropping, so you constantly trade field of view for smoothness. If you are bombing down a narrow trail or weaving through trees, the wider mode might be the better choice, even if you live with a bit more movement, because it preserves that immersive, high-speed feel. The point is that the camera gives you options, and you can tune it for each scene instead of living with a single baked-in behavior. DJI also tries to fix a very modern problem: how to start and stop recording when the camera is far from your hand. This generation adds gesture control, which lets you trigger the camera from a distance without a remote. Hold up your hand in frame to begin recording, and repeat the gesture to stop. When you are filming yourself with the camera on a pole, a helmet, or a tripod across the room, this is genuinely freeing. You do not have to shuffle back and forth just to reach the buttons. There are some caveats. Your palm has to be clearly visible, and thick winter sleeves can confuse the system if they hide the edges of your hand. Sometimes you will need to adjust your framing or step closer so the camera can see you properly. Once you learn its sweet spot, though, it quickly becomes second nature. Combined with the traditional record button, gesture control makes it much harder to miss a moment, simply because you could not reach the camera in time. Physically, the Action 6 will look very familiar if you have used the Action 5 Pro or the tiny Osmo Nano. It shares the same basic shape, the same magnetic mounting system on the bottom, and a similar layout for ports and the battery compartment. The most noticeable visual change is the new stealthy dark color scheme. The red accents from the previous model are mostly gone, making this camera look closer to the Action 4 family and a bit more low-key on the front of a helmet or rig. On one side, you still get a USB-C port for charging and data, a door for the removable battery, and a micro SD slot. Internal storage has been bumped up to 50 gigabytes, which is enough for over an hour of 4K 25 frames per second recording, even if you forget your card. The battery capacity stays just under 2,000 milliamp hours. In practice, that translates to around 4 hours of continuous full HD capture at modest frame rates, or less if you are pushing 4K and high frame rates where processing and heat increase. Heat management is an area where DJI quietly edges ahead of some rivals. In a basic indoor torture test at 4K 60, the Action 6 ran for about 1 hour and 50 minutes before the battery finally gave up, with the body sitting around the mid-40-degree mark in Celsius. A competing model hit 50 degrees and shut itself down twice from overheating before its battery was empty. If you film long sports sessions, live events, or extended talking head pieces, that reliability is worth more than yet another headline feature. Audio is another area where DJI leans on its ecosystem. If you already own the second or third generation DJI wireless mics, the transmitters can connect directly to the Action 6 without a bulky cage or extra receiver. The camera can capture both the wireless feed and its built-in microphones at the same time, and it can even record a safety track internally. If the radio feed cuts out, that backup can save a take that would otherwise be ruined by a dropout or a dead battery in your mic. Inside the audio settings, you can choose whether the backup is saved as a separate file or as an extra track inside the same video file. You can also let the camera keep recording internally for a short moment after you stop the main clip, just in case you cut a little too early. It is one of those features you will forget exists until the day it rescues an important moment, and then you will never want to live without it. On the image side, the Action 6 supports 10-bit D-Log-M, the same flat color profile you find across a range of DJI products. That means you can shoot with this camera, a Pocket Series gimbal cam, and certain DJI drones, then match all that footage much more easily when you grade. Use the same profile, and your colors sit in the same ballpark without hours of fighting different rendering styles from each device. If you are not into color grading, you can still use a simple lookup table to convert D-Log-M into something more finished, or just skip log entirely and stay in standard or classic color modes. DJI also offers built-in film style filters and a set of neutral density options like ND, 8, 16, and 30. Combined with the variable aperture, these filters let you keep your shutter speed under control even in brutal sunlight, so you can avoid that harsh, crisp video look that screams tiny sensor action cam. Underwater and wet weather performance are also strong. Out of the box, the Action 6 is rated for 20 meters of depth without any extra housing, while one of its main competitors tops out around half that. Even if you never dive that deep, the extra headroom makes the camera more confident for surf sessions, whitewater, mountain biking in the rain, or snowboarding, where repeated splashes and pressure spikes hit the body hard. In darker underwater scenes, you can see the benefit of the larger sensor and wide aperture combination. Shots that would normally turn into a noisy soup hold on to more shape and color. In an extreme low-light pool test, the rival camera rendered the water surface as almost pure black, with almost no separation, while the Action 6 still showed ripples, reflections, and detail around a hand held in front of the lens. It is not magic, but it is a noticeable step up inside a very tough environment. Day to day, both the front and rear screens are crisp and bright enough for outdoor framing. The side information shows you live aperture and exposure data, and you can quickly flip through modes to move from normal video into a square project, a vertical project, or dedicated low-light modes. The menus are deep, with controls for sharpness, noise reduction, and wind handling. But once you save a custom preset, you can recall your favorite settings with a single tap instead of digging through pages every time. And that brings us to the real verdict. The Osmo Action 6 is not a dramatic reinvention. It does not suddenly make the Action 5 Pro or Osmo Nano obsolete, and in bright daylight it can be difficult to tell them apart at normal viewing sizes. But it does quietly improve almost every edge case. Low light is meaningfully better. Stabilization is more flexible. Underwater confidence is higher. Heat management is stronger. Audio and color tools make it easier to slot this camera into a serious workflow. If you already own the previous generation and mostly shoot in good light, you can absolutely keep your money. Your camera is still excellent. If your work leans heavily on night scenes, long, unbroken recordings, underwater shooting, or multi-camera projects with DJI drones and gimbals, the Action 6 starts to look very attractive. If you are buying your first serious action camera and want the most balanced package right now, this is an easy recommendation. Tiny cameras are no longer an excuse for tiny storytelling. The best camera is the one that actually makes you shoot more, not the one with the longest spec sheet. If this breakdown helped you see past the marketing and closer to how the Action 6 really performs, tap like, share this with a friend who is stuck deciding what to buy, and support the channel Winds of Thought so we can keep testing this gear honestly instead of reading you launch slides.